Listeners, you're in for a treat today. We are here with Anandamayi Baker, who has recently published a children's book called Becoming Strong. And it is a wonderful story about a little bee. And I'm so excited to talk with you today about your process of landing on this inspirational idea, the different ways that you incorporated all the deep breathing and meditation and all this advice and recommendations for children at a level that they can understand, which is integrated into the storyline about this adorable little bee who has a corkscrew antenna and needs glasses because she can't see well, and she's worried that she's not strong and she isn't sure how to, be her own unique self. And you've just created this beautiful story. And I would love to hear from you about your inspiration for that, as well as your publishing process.
Elizabeth, thank you for having me on, and thank you for that beautiful introduction. That was so dear and sweet and spot on as far as what the book is about. So thank you. So yes, Becoming Strong, I can show you what it looks like. There she is. That's little Jazzianza with a corkscrew antenna and her glasses. It's the way the whole process started was I was living on Palomar Mountain, which I dearly love, and that's in eastern San Diego County. And there was a little fountain outside the restaurant I used to work in. And when bees would come to drink from it, I noticed that children would run screaming away and flailing their hands, and of course that scares bees. Nobody got stung, but it really was a whole different experience than what I had, because I would meditate outside a lot of times on Palomar, and there were, what were they called? The little yellow flowers. I forgot what they're called now, but they were all around me. And so bees would come and literally walk around the palms of my hand, like tickling the hands, the palms. And I thought, oh my gosh, these kids have no idea. So this was back in 2010. And I thought, someday I'd like to write like a little Dr. Seuss kind of rhymey book about bees so that children wouldn't be afraid. So that was a little idea that I got. And then I went to India to have a hip replacement, and I brought with me, what's it called? The Dummy's Guide to Children's Book Writing, because I knew nothing about it. And I started writing all these cute little rhymey buzzle wuzzle cuzzle words, onomatopoeia, you know. And I thought, okay, that's good. I'm getting it done. And then I came back to work, healed up, started working, and put the book aside. And then the pandemic started, which we all remember. And so I remembered the book and I pulled it out, and I ended up emailing a few friends of mine, two of whom are therapists, and one is a grandmother helping to raise her child, her granddaughter. And I said, what are kids going through these days? Because I thought, I don't even know if it's relevant. Because, right, what's the point of writing something if it's not relevant? So the answers I got back from all of them, I literally started sobbing when I read, because children were going through so much that it was just devastating to read, like meltdowns, bullying, anxiety, fear, just like, am I ever going to see my friends again? And just so much, so much. So I thought, I cannot write a cute little silly rhyming book. If I'm going to do anything and spend my time, it has to be something. So I asked the universe, look, if you want me to do something, you've got to really make it clear, because I'm a little dense. And if you really want me to do this, make it really clear. So I think it was the next day after that really sincere prayer request that I had to drive down about an hour and a half away. Oh, by this point, I have to fast forward. I had to retire early because I got this really weird, rare autoimmune disease that nearly killed me. So here I am, like in Orange County, and I had to drive about an hour and a half away to get these special shots once a month. And it was pouring rain, absolutely pouring. And but luckily, because of the pandemic, hardly anybody was on the road. It was still pouring rain when I went into the get the shots. It was still raining when I got out, and I got ready to get on the freeway. Look in the side view mirror, and Elizabeth, guess what was there? A little bee. She was clinging to the side view mirror. And bees don't do that. Bees do not go out in the rain. They just don't do that. And I mean, that's the kind of clear answer I need, right? So I said, okay, that's clear, that's good. So that's how it started. And then I just kept asking for guidance. And a lot of times things would come up for me in meditation that I would write down, and then a couple of days later I'd come back to the writing and I'd think, I don't even remember writing this down. So that's kind of how that was the inspiration. That's how it started going. And I was thinking it's interesting because you started a women's memoir writing club, right? Well, this is Jazianza's memoir. Jazianza, the little bee. This is basically her memoir. So I thought that was a fun link to the work you're doing. So she just told me and I transcribed it, and this is her memoir. So I thought that was really fun. And the other fun,
Well, and
what's that?
you can see the level of heart that you've put into this story, and that's the same level of heart that people, inject into their memoir. Like, you're remembering your own childhood experiences with the bugs and with nature, and you've just imparted so much of that, both embedding actual knowledge and tidbits and facts, about bees having five
Yeah.
eyes and all of that sort of thing into the book, into the learning experience. But then also that level of healing that you get from nature. Was this writing, did that serve as like any sort of healing or reflection process for you as
Well, there
well?
are two things that really saved my life. As a child, I grew up in a really dysfunctional home, and I was blessed to have a grandfather who was a naturalist. I mean, he actually had so many bugs and insect collections that he was in the, I think it was the 1929 World's Fair in on Treasure Island. And so I grew up with a lot of insects and bugs all around that I mean, tarantulas bigger than my hand that I could see and things like that. And so, yeah, so so I was naturally interested in nature, and I realized that that was a huge blessing because, especially these days, people are on their devices. They're looking like this, they're not looking at nature. And that was one of the reasons why I put like little details, for instance, about the five eyes and about Jazianza flying out to see how much a blade of grass grew last night, because I wanted to just instill these little seeds into children's minds and hearts, and the adults helping reading with them, to like pay attention to what's around us, because there's so much awe that we can take in instead of being on our devices. So that was very intentional. And then the breathing, which again, I thought that was a fun link to you, because you have the Inspired Writing Collective. Inspired comes from inspiration, breathing in. So, and that's how we can create. Only by breathing in and letting it all mix can we breathe out something creative. And so the other thing that really saved me was I've been really fortunate to have been able to still study with a realized yoga master for almost 40 years now. And not only learning meditation techniques, which really helped me to know that my life is important and valuable, which is one of the big things I wanted to instill in the book. Because as a child, I didn't know that. And I don't think most children know there's a deep intrinsic value. But then also the breathing, some breathing practices so that we can really quickly become calm and centered, because I didn't have that. And so, yeah, those two things, nature and yoga, I wanted to just pour into the book and hopefully give children and adults something to really consider and use kind of as just a go-to that they can always have.
I thought that was a really beautiful way that you explain that in the book, and I guess I had never really heard it simplified so well. But when you're talking about how Jazzianza could only be herself, and I think it was Mama Queensy Bee who was telling her, the rainbow can't be a tree, and this can't be a that, and just like putting it in such like concrete but diverse terms is like, of course the rainbow could never be a tree, and why would it want to be, or why would the tree want to be a rainbow? And so that really struck me, the way that you emphasize that in the book. And the other piece that I was honestly surprised about was the way that your sort of like villain character with the hornet ultimately was not as scary and villainous by the end of the book and the final kind of confrontation as what the beginning of the book may have set them up to be. And so you did a really great job of sort of wrapping that up, and not only helping children not be scared of the bees, but also maybe not fear the hornets
Yes,
either.
yes. There's a little interesting story behind that, because I don't know if you read. I think it's on the yeah, it's on the back of the book. Martin Dorn, who's a wildlife filmmaker, and he and a producer, and he has an incredible body of work. But what I saw during the pandemic was his for anybody who has any interest in bees, you must watch his documentary, My Garden of a Thousand Bees. You don't have to, but I really encourage you to. My Garden of a Thousand Bees, because he developed cameras where he could look at bees. He did this during the pandemic because he couldn't go anywhere to do filming. He's famous. He's done all kinds of work with National Wildlife and David Attenborough and people like that. And he on his garden, he in his garden he made cameras so he could look at all these bees. And so I reached out to him during the writing of the book just to see, hey, would you be into writing a little blurb? And he responded very kindly and said, yes, I'd be happy to. And so I sent him the book. And at the time, the hornet was going to be King Hemazil hornet. And he told me, no, it's like the bees, that it's the females that go out, not the males. So I changed it from King Hemazil hornet to
Mm-hmm.
Queen Hemazil hornet. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that was a fun thing for me to learn too. But there was something else you said about the beginning about the. Okay, cut this out. So when you told me two things that you thought were interesting about the book. About what was it? Oh,
The really concrete way that you talked
yes.
about how the rainbow,
Thank you.
could not
Okay,
be a
so
tree.
this
Mm-hmm.
that part about the rainbow can't be a tree. You can't be anybody else. That was a crucial thing I wanted to put in, because as a child, and I think most people on this planet, unless you're really grounded and centered in yourself, we grew up wanting to be somebody else. And as adults, I mean, you even see that with movie stars. They're never so often, these movie stars that look like perfect aren't happy with the way their bodies work or look. And for me, I
Mm-hmm.
always wanted straight blonde hair and blue eyes. That was never going to happen, because that was who popular girls had straight blonde hair. That was never going to happen. So I wanted to instill in children early on, look, you are meant to be who you are, exactly who you are. Who you are is precious. You have something unique that nobody else has or was supposed to have or will ever have again. And that was a really big thing. So I'm really happy that you noted that, because I think that's crucial to give to our children and ourselves and one another.
Absolutely. Now, what was your experience? You
Oh,
self-published this, right? But did you reach out to publishers first? What was your experience with the
okay. Good
publication
question.
process?
Because I know you both did like a 2 session thing on publishing. And I knew nothing when I wrote the book. It just so happened that a dear friend of mine, the Indian astronomer, who that's where I got, it was her idea to put the big glasses on Jaziansa because she has glasses. A good friend of hers is an illustrator, and she's the one who ended up illustrating the book, Akiko Martinash. And so she said, hey, Akiko could maybe do the illustrations. And I looked at her work and I said, yes. And then a good friend of mine who's been, what do you call it? She's done formatting and graphic designer all her life. She just recently retired. She said, let me see the book, because I had asked her a question. And she said, oh, I want to format it for you. And if you try to pay me, I won't do it. And so that was so kind. So I had that all put together. And then when I sent it, or when I was researching to who to send it to, almost all of them said, hey, we want to do the formatting, we want to do the illustrating. So they didn't want to look at the book. So that was a big surprise. So I ended up going with on Amazon and Ingram Spark. But what I will say is that, and you did say that in one of your podcasts, about even when you have a publisher, you still have to do a lot of the marketing, because a good friend of mine
Mhm.
whose good friend has written many books, was originally told by a big publisher, you get on this TV show and we'll do all this publishing for you. She got on the TV show. They hardly did anything. So, and they take a big chunk of the royalties. So it's kind of like, I don't know, you're going to have to do it either way. But
Yes.
I'm in a really wonderful author book club called Happily Ever Author Book Club. It's been really supportive. I don't think I could have gotten the book out otherwise. And what Sue talks about is, instead of calling it marketing, which has this heavy thing on it, call it connecting. Like,
Hmm.
we're just connecting. And it really lightens it
Beautiful.
up. So I'd recommend that for people that are listening. But either way, connecting, it's a big thing. It's like the never ending story.
Right, and that marketing or connecting piece, it's done bite by bite. It's done, one connection at a time or interaction, or maybe you get some opportunities like being on a podcast where you might reach
Right?
more than one person at a time, but it's that one next step and that one next step and
Yes.
that one next step. Do you have plans for any additional books, whether those be children's books or
Well,
other?
it's funny because monarchs have always been really dear to my heart, because my grandfather helped us to raise monarchs from when I was like 5 or something. And so I always thought, well, if I ever do another book, maybe it'd be about, and that's why Lida Butterfly, the monarch, is in the book. Well, last July, I was going home. I come out. I was gotten out of the car, walking down the carport, walked into to put my key in the door, the back door, and there's no monarch, there's no milkweed, like for 80 feet around, which is the only plant a monarch caterpillar will eat. And there, on the side of my door near the keyhole, is a monarch caterpillar. So it's kind of like that same,
Mhm.
okay, here's a bee on the windshield, on the window, on the mirror, and here is a monarch caterpillar. So I started one sentence a night because it's all my little brain can do right now. So I started writing a book about that. Josian's is in it, and it's with a monarch caterpillar who goes through life and is afraid of change. And here is he supposed to change a lot, that kind of thing, because
Oh.
change is a thing that we're afraid of as children and as adults. So, yeah.
Right, especially as kids where you don't get those choices of how, your life changes. A lot of times the adults in your life are
Right.
making those choices for you and you may not understand the reasons or the bigger picture or any of that. But I mean, you are just the epitome of writing from inspiration. So I'm so glad that you were able to join us today on the Inspired Writer Collective podcast to talk about the ways in which you have let those little moments of inspiration blossom into, the story that you have published, becoming strong, and also inspiring this next creation, which we can't wait to talk about and see at some point in the future. Do you think you'll go a different route with the publishing of that book? Will you seek the more traditional route and have them select a formatter and an illustrator for you? Or are you really happy with how the first book turned out and want consistency with how it looks?
That's a
What's
really good
your thoughts on
question. And
that?
it's something I've been pondering because Akiko is doing her own single, huge display of all her work in Tokyo in November. So she's tied up.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I think again, I'm waiting for inspiration. It's the best thing to do. So we'll see. I don't know. No, we'll see what comes forward because I'm open. And I mean, that is really the best way for us to be inspired, right? To because we can a lot of times we talk and talk and talk and talk to the universe, and then we don't listen. We don't take time to listen. So it's kind of like,
Mhm.
"Hi, Elizabeth." Blah 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 blah. Okay, bye. You know. So I'm gonna try to just listen and see what happens.
I think the thing that inspires me the most about hearing you talk about this process for you and this story is the patience that you maintain as a writer, waiting for that inspiration, or even the patience you have with yourself, where you just described that you write a sentence every night because that's what you have the capacity for. And I hope that other people hear that and are also inspired by the fact that you can always be taking tiny steps, no matter how small they may be, or even though the waiting time where you're waiting for that answer instead of rushing forward with something that doesn't resonate or doesn't feel right. I just think that's a beautiful to this story that I hope others see and
Well,
appreciate
that
and feel
ties
inspired
into
by.
one of your podcasts that I listened to about kind of like what happens when things happen along the way that you're not expecting. So I've had 5 concussions in my
Mhm.
life. So I've had a lot of brain trauma, and at times, and with this autoimmune disease, at times stuff happens and I just can't think properly. And so, yeah, you're right. It takes a lot of patience and it takes trusting, kind of like what Mama Queensy Bee says. You're supposed to be here. All of those things, there was a reason for them. And even if it's one sentence a day, that's okay. So, and there was a woman I remember seeing who on some writer's thing, this is an inspiring thing. She had, I cannot remember what she had, but she was, for years, had been kind of partially paralyzed. She was writing a book from her bed, flat up from her bed. So
Wow.
the thing is, and so I'm way better off than that. And I'm not having bombs dropping on me as I'm writing. So, yeah, I think it can always be worse, and this is the hand we're given, so let's
Mhm.
see what we can do with it. Yep.
Absolutely. Well, I know not only you're into the writing of these children's books. You're also into your yoga practice and insects in general. So we're going to have a link in this video to your email list. I know you email
Yep.
out about those, as well as children's development and those sort of things that run through, the stories of your books. And also, we will have a link to Anandamayi Baker's book on Amazon if you're interested in picking that up for any young one in your family that you think could benefit from those same lessons of how to calm and center yourself, how to handle bullying and feeling different, and embracing their full selves. So, thank you so much for being here with us today. And anything
It's
else you'd
just
like to
been a
throw
joy to
in?
be with you, Elizabeth. You're really present. You really pay attention. I really appreciate you and all the work you're doing. Oh, and one other thing, let's see. And you can have a link to my website as well. Yeah. But mainly I just
Absolutely.
you made
All
it
right,
easy.
everyone. Have a great
Thank
day
you.
and feel
Bye-bye.
inspired.
Take care.
Wonderful.